What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. We got special guest Robert from Marine Depot. What is going on,
Hello.
Robert?
Hello, Devin. How are you, man? Thanks for
Ec-
having me on again.
Always good to have you. How are you
Yep.
doing this fine day?
I cannot complain, man.
Yeah?
Yeah, things are good. It's raining here. It's been raining like crazy, like more so than it's ever rained my
Oh,
entire life.
really?
Yeah, it's been a crazy wet winter here. It's pretty much every week, man. We got a little storm that rolls through, so that's been different for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair. Oh well, just getting everything prepped for springtime. I'm ready for spring, so.
Yeah, no, me too.
Hey, Robert, what shirt are you wearing?
Oh yeah, look at that.
Ah.
That's a good one.
I like it. Great minds think alike.
That's right.
Even the same color.
I know.
That's almost like we planned it, but totally did it. So that's extra awesome.
I know. It's neat.
Yep. So today we kind of want to talk about fish and corals, especially if you order stuff online. You got to acclimate stuff, get stuff in your tank, avoiding pests, all those different types of things.
Sure. Well, I was gonna say, yeah, it can be. There's I don't want to say debate, but I guess it is debate. I mean, there's so much different advice out there, you know. People tell you to go through it different ways, and obviously, what people actually do is far different than what everybody tells you to do. So, yeah, I think there's a few things that as long as you get those done when you get new animals, you're gonna really increase your chances, you know.
Nope, definitely. Now, when possible, I mean, I always do prefer to buy stuff locally when I can see it in person, see it with my own eyes. If it's
Yep.
fish, make sure you get a good look at it and there's no pests or anything on it. Or no, it's not pests, sorry, like diseases, no clouding to the eyes, no spots, make sure they're actually eating properly, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when you can buy a fish at a local store, you know, oftentimes you have that benefit of being able to at least go back and see the fish more than once, or just talk to somebody who's been taking care of it. You know, and ideally you have a repertoire, at least some sort of trust with your local fish store. You know.
Yep, exactly. Another thing is too is resisting that temptation. Whether I mean this more if it's local, but not buying something that second it comes in the store. You know, let it be there for a
Oh.
week or two and make sure it's actually acclimates properly and everything's healthy with it.
Yeah, I know. I see people talk about like, oh, I'm getting corals in this week, or we're getting a bunch of these this week, and I kind of think to myself, I'm like, well, it's probably better to sit on those for a couple of weeks before you go. And I understand wanting first pick, but if the coral's infested with stuff, it's not going to live anyway. What does it matter?
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah.
So talking about infested, so ordering stuff online is kind of a bigger topic. Not everyone
Sure.
has an LFS store they can go to, or they want something special that's harder to find.
Right.
And one thing that I see pop up a lot is dealing with potentially like photoshopped frags, or you look at it and the
Yeah.
colors are just too good, they're too bright.
Right. For me, like it's taken a little bit, but obviously because the kind of work that I do kind of helps spot, photo modifications or photoshopped images. There's just a few things you look for, and it can be quite obvious, when the colors just aren't natural. I kind of look at red or orange colors because they seem to sort of blast out, being opposite of the blue light. And then contrast points where you'll see like, the edge of a coral where it meets the backdrop or something like that. A lot of times at those points, you'll see like a rough edge, or you'll see it cut, or there'll be something funky that, will set it out of place. And so it kind of just takes experience in order to learn how to spot those things. But it's not hard to find. There's a lot of guys out there that are pretty good at, catching it, and it can be quite obvious.
Yep. The other thing I look for too is looking at the whites in the photo. Like if it's on egg crate or if it's on a frag rack, is that actually the proper white color, or is it some crazy other color that's been oversaturated and weird colors blowing out of the proportion? So
Yes, exactly. And I mean, there's some truth to say, like, if the photoshopping or the correction doesn't make the coral look super natural, I don't necessarily have too big of a problem with it. I mean, it's just like correcting any other photo. And in fish tanks, the color is often way off. So, color correction definitely probably has a place, but when you start dealing with saturation and, manipulating like the fluorescent type colors, that's when it gets into a little shady area, so to speak.
I agree. I've only had one bad experience where I bought something and showed up. It looked like nothing like the photo. I'm like, I paid way too much for this. What the heck?
Yeah, I think our community policed it pretty well. I think early on in the days, it was far more commonplace, but now you've got a ton of frag dealers and a ton of them online, and like reputation's everything when it comes to that. So I think guys have sort of shied away from it. It's really few and far between that you see guys actually try to pull one over on you,
One thing that's kind of cool, some retailers will actually show, this looks like under 10,000, 12,000, 4,000 Kelvin.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's kind of neat when they have the two pictures, or they'll just do like a 10K and a 20K. Yeah, that's kind of a neat approach because everybody's tank is different, and ultimately you want to know what it's going to look like in your aquarium.
Exactly. And even like from T5's LEDs, like every tank thing, even tanks in a buddy's tank, I take the same frag home and a month later it looks nothing like his, which is...
Yeah, no, that's the really cool thing about coral,
Mm-hmm.
it can change so drastically based on the environment. It can almost look like two different species, but came from the same brood stock, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Nope, exactly. What was Terrence saying? It'd be best to have a neutral camera, 2 photos. Yeah, so even getting one under whites, one under the blues gives you a really good idea. So,
Yeah, no, exactly.
but so people do. Okay, so you get your coral home, shows up in the mail.
Right.
To actually get it into your tank. Now, the first thing I always do, fish corals regardless. Actually, one thing that you mentioned before was taking a photo of it just in case there's an issue.
Yeah.
Kind of have your proof or it documents it along the way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
just make it a habit of like pretty much any delivery that comes to my door, especially if it's expensive. I'll just take photos. I mean, even if the box is in perfect shape,
Mm-hmm.
at least you have it, there's been some crazy stuff happen, and
Yep.
so I just like to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you don't need the photos, whatever, it just takes 2 seconds to do it. You've got your phone. So,
Okay. Now, do you want to dig into corals or fish first?
let's talk about fish because we'll probably get through that quicker.
Okay, sounds good. So fish comes. Now,
Yep.
one thing you got to think that fish has been shipped from who knows where, on an airplane or a truck. It's probably going
Yeah.
to be stressed out. It's in this little dark bag of water for 24 hours. So, one of the first things to consider is doing what you can to not stress out the fish further.
Yeah. Yeah. So, light acclimation is one that people talk about, but something that's kind of less common is handling. And you see this in a lot of local fish stores too. But yeah, the way that you handle the fish in the bag, it can really put a lot of stress on the fish.
Mm-hmm.
Guys will twist the bags. They'll lift them up to bright light to look at them. Ideally, you're not having anybody poking in the acclimation chamber, but occasionally, just the way that you handle it can really add stress to the fish in an already sensitive situation, so to speak.
Yep. Now, one of the main important things in my eyes is to make sure you properly temperature acclimate the fish. So one of the first things to do is want to float the bag in some tank water. Now, because you're bringing the fish out of a dark place where it's been for the last 24 hours or so, you don't want to immediately throw it under your crazy bright LEDs blinding the poor little guy because this is going to startle him.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you can imagine, dark room, get a bunch of light blast on you, unbeknownst to you, it's just all that more stressful. So yeah, just open the box slowly is something I try to always practice. Sometimes I forget, but I try to be mindful, especially with fish.
Yeah. Now, ideally, same thing, if I am adding a fish to the tank, I generally try and do it closer to lights out, or I'll just turn off the lights for an hour. That way, kind of gives the other fish more time to hide a bit. They think it's nighttime and they're not going to necessarily harass the new fish when it first goes into the tank.
Yeah, it's the same with feeding. You want to feed them, and then typically acclimate the fish, with the lights off. I would oftentimes I'll wait just until it's naturally the nighttime in the tank, but it's okay to go ahead and turn it off. If it's say typical hours that are daytime. But yeah, I mean, all you're doing is just trying to reduce the likelihood of aggression towards the new fish.
Exactly. Another trick that I do sometimes too is I'll feed the fish first too, right? So they're not. The fish tend to be a little more aggressive if they're hungry.
Oh, sure, yeah,
they're,
of course.
They're well.
Yeah, feed the tank. That goes to note too with new fish. They're not going to eat a lot of times right away, so don't try to feed them. Especially if it's like you don't have any fish, you got a brand new one, you dump a bunch of food in there. Yeah, you end up just adding waste to the tank sometimes. So I've seen it more often than not. People get excited about their first fish and they dump like a whole frozen cube for one clownfish.
Yeah.
And then a week later, it's brown. So
yeah, and generally a new fish won't even eat for the first 24 hours or so, anyways, until it settles.
Yeah. After 24 hours, if the fish isn't starting to show interest, by then I'll be a little concerned. Then 36 hours is kind of at the point where it's like, all right, there's either something wrong with the fish or I'm not giving it the right food.
Mm-hmm. Nope, very true. Oh, someone said an echo. Just fix that. I have my speakers on. Fixed.
Cool.
Okay, so the other thing is too, if depending on your fish, a lot of people is a good idea if you have the space to quarantine a fish.
Yes, quarantine's huge. This is one of those do as I say, not as I do sometimes. But Yeah, we could talk about it all day, but I mean, essentially, just giving yourself the chance to identify any problems with the fish, infections, or even pests or parasites in a separate tank allows you to not only treat it with stronger meds, but you can identify it and not put your other fish at risk. I mean, just putting the fish into your display tank, you're putting all the other fish in that tank at risk of getting something. And then also you're unable, when you keep coral, you can't put strong meds in there. And so you're ending up with a lot longer treatment time, putting all of the fish through stress, and less likely chance of recovery.
And the big thing you got to think about as well is when you're adding a new fish to the tank, more than just the fish you're adding, it's potentially could infect all your other fish that's been in your tank for years, all your established system, right? So it's
Right.
protecting
Yeah.
your system as a whole.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not just for the health of that fish in particular. It's really to protect everything else that you've already established as healthy and clean, so
Yeah.
to speak.
So, I mean, that's the general gist for the most part with fish. I mean, there is certain treatments that are fairly popular, like safety sop and certain things that you could work into your acclimation,
Sure.
which is kind of a good step if you're not doing a full quarantine. Now, on the other side of things, so quarantining fish is fairly common practice. Quarantining corals, not so much. I find not many people will go through that extent with corals.
Right. There's certain challenges with it, but there's also some huge benefits. So I guess we can get into that when we talk about coral. But
Yeah. So on the fish side, is there any other
right.
precautions that you generally take when getting a new fish?
Well, yeah. I talk about this a lot, but observation is huge, and so the quarantine tank gives you time. Just look at this fish. You want to see the kind of health that it's in. How is it breathing? Sometimes, there are lesions and sores and different things on the skin of the fish that are pretty obvious, but a lot of times you may not see that stuff right away. So just repeated observation, getting to know the fish, how it acts, and then how it eats, all of that stuff you can kind of figure out in a quarantine tank. That way, when you go into, the display tank where it's often, a rat race, so to speak, it's just a lot easier to care for them because you already know what to expect, so to speak.
No, definitely. And aside from that, too, if you're getting pickier fish, make sure certain ones like, say, a copper-bound butterfly or certain fish that are known to be very picky eaters, make sure you have a plan and make sure they're actually eating, they're healthy before they get into the tank.
Sure, yeah, that was something I guess we didn't really taste. Is plan ahead, it's really important to be knowledgeable about things you're buying. I think many of you guys are aware, but there's just a classic trap of getting so excited because something's so cool looking, and one person tells you it's okay, and then everybody else tells you it's not, and you learn quickly that everybody else is right. And so, yeah, plan ahead. A little research can save you a ton of headaches and a lot of money. And I mean, it's a simple Google search. I mean, the information is pretty concrete in terms of compatibility and the suitability for an animal inside of an aquarium. It's usually no gray area. It's like
aggressive, semi.
Yeah, the aggressive, semi-aggressive, but also like diet. Like this fish is hard to feed, and pretty much all of those fish are going to be hard to feed. You got a lot of debate with mandarins because they're just so pretty and so popular, and I think it's just because there's so many fish out there. But I still strongly believe that a majority of them that are wild collected are tough to feed. It takes a lot of work and a very dedicated person to get them onto a prepared diet. But once you have it, it's easy. You just have to keep up with it.
Yep. Now, on that same note, too, if there are those type of fish, there is certain retailers too, well, they'll already precondition them to eat frozen or pellets, that type of stuff. And I mean, spending a little more money up front to get one that is for sure eating prepared foods goes a long way to ensuring that you'll be successful.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's if you've got the kind of fish store that's willing to go that extra mile for you, it says a lot about just the fish store in general. But there's also a lot of service companies. I often find it's service companies that do this, but they'll locate fish for you. So like if you have something that you really want, and you trust your service guy, they'll often for extra fees, they'll track down a particular fish for you and then also condition it. Quarantine it, make sure it's healthy and eating, and will live inside of your tank because obviously they take care of that tank, and anything that happens they're going to blame you. So they kind of have a prerogative to do it, but it can be a really nice service for those of you that are interested in, let's just say, collecting fish or something like that. It can be a pretty useful resource.
Yep, exactly. Beekeeper just saying my captive bred mandarin needs everything a little more expensive, but worth it. 100% agree with you.
Yeah, captive bred. I mean, all day. That kind of stuff is I guess we could just run down, but I mean, a fish that's actually captive bred and grown in an aquarium is, I can't give you a number, but it's just far more likely to be happy in an aquarium because that's all it knows.
Exactly.
And it's much easier for it to be happy, stress-free, and easier on you too,
Exactly. It's worth a bit of money because if you think about it, these fish can live, 10, 15, 20 years, right? So you're going to have them for a long time. What's an extra
Yeah,
30, $40 for 10 years, 20 years of having this animal in your care, right? So,
exactly. No, I fully agree. And when it comes to livestock too, like, yeah, no,
mm-hmm.
don't take this the wrong way because coral prices are crazy. But
I agree.
yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the price is usually well worth the life of the animal.
That and
And
I would happily pay an extra 30, $40 for a fish, knowing it was pre-quarantined, it's healthy, and I don't have to worry about it.
sure, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another one actually Terrence mentioned earlier about aggression acclimation boxes. Is that something that you've normally used in the past?
I have, but
Mm-hmm.
only like as a what is that reactive measure,
Mm-hmm.
not
Yeah.
necessarily proactive measure. So yeah, I mean it worked. I mean, I guess when we talk about, you know, say you have a display tank, you're trying to add this, say a new tang in,
Mm-hmm.
and old tang, your zebrasoma is just not having it with acanthurus,
Yep.
and so in those situations, sometimes I've taken out. Usually, the more dominant or aggressive fish is the one I'll try to get because it's
Mm-hmm.
usually the easiest to get, and then isolate that one. But generally speaking, it's not until I get them into the tank that you really understand the severity of the aggression, and that's when you pull it out. I have used them. I've also rearranged rock work. Just throwing them for a loop because they'll
Mm-hmm.
establish territories, and generally that's what it is, if not competition for food. And so if you mess around those territories, a lot of times they'll have to reestablish or just pull the aggressive fish and
Mm-hmm.
put him in jail for a couple months, and then put him back in the tank, and all will go well.
Yeah. Uh,
Hopefully.
once he's learned his lesson, yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny, they talk about fishy jail, but I mean, it really it can be effective.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also some fish that just have no business being around other fish because they
Yep.
eat them, and they should just be by themselves.
Yep, that's fair. Skookum Reefer was asking, is lowering the salinity in quarantine to 1.020 beneficial?
Oh, the salinity, I never touch it. I just feel that it stresses out animals more so than not, and
Mm-hmm.
you can start affecting your bacterial populations and different things like that.
Yep.
I've always been a big reef tank guy though, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
always concerned with corals and that sort of foundation there. I have had many conversations, talked to plenty of guys that love to collect fish, and they practice like a hyposalinity
Mm-hmm.
or adjusting temperature, but for me, I've never done it. No.
I've never done it either.
Yeah.
My overall thought on it is a lot of these kind of odd and different treatments. Like, yes, they can work for ick and certain things, or doing tank transfer and all that stuff. But at the
Yeah.
same time, you got to consider that you're also stressing out the fish with all of these steps. And if a
Yeah.
fish is stressed, it's more prone to have an issue or have a lower immune system, get infected. So
Yeah.
something
And
else
that's
to
the
take
thing
into
is like
consideration.
just arming yourself with all of this knowledge of all of these things that can stress the fish, you're going to be far less likely to induce any of that stress. Anything you can control, as far as the stress, far less likely to do it. And then 9 times out of 10, you won't have problems if you just go through the process correctly. It's people start cutting corners is when you run into problems. It's like, well, okay, you didn't quarantine or dip your fish. Now it's sick, and you're trying to figure out a way to cure it, but
Yep.
you don't want to quarantine again, and you still don't want to buy medication. Okay,
Yep.
go drop your salinity, and talk to me next week. Talk to me next week.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So that's a whole nother boat right there.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And that's what I was saying in the beginning here too. Is like, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and everybody's kind of got their own sort of recipe for success. But I think there's a few key things that you'll hit when you specifically, I'm more referring to coral here because it's a little particular in terms of keeping the pests out of your tank. But if you hit a few of those major points, like dipping them, cutting off the frag plug, watching them, or at least rinsing them before they go back in your tank, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be okay.
Okay, so we're always trying to transition to coral here.
All right.
Okay,
Yeah, we love coral too much. I guess it's hard to
we
stay away.
we do. Okay, so we get our nice box of beautiful corals in the mail. We open it up. First thing that to me usually stands out is usually the water's a bit cold because those little
Yep.
heat packs only go so long. So first thing I always do is float the coral in my tank for 20, 30 minutes, let all the temperatures equalize. And that's kind of step one.
Yep.
Now, step 2 is usually I want to put the coral through some form of a dip. Now, I'm a big thing, doesn't care if it's your best friend, anybody, I dip everything goes in my tank because all
Yep.
it takes is one little pest to cause a nightmare in your tank.
Yep. Yeah, same thing here. So pretty much right, right when it comes in, I'll try to, be there. That was one thing that was, I think we were talking about earlier was, pre-order or post pre-arrival of your animals, watch your tracking numbers and be prepared to be home when you get your animals. Letting them sit at your house for 6, 7, 8 hours in sun or cold or whatever, that can have a pretty negative effect. That
Mm-hmm.
animal could have got to your door super happy.
Yeah.
And then those following 6 hours that you were at work could potentially have caused, the stress that was the failure, so to speak. So just keep that in mind. I always try to be home when I order these things so I can receive
Yep.
them right away, drop it in the tank with the bag to acclimate it. And then, I'll go prepare everything. So get the containers. There are certain tools that I like to have around.
What's your
Usually don't wear
go-to?
gloves. Yeah, I usually don't wear goggles, but occasionally I'll wear gloves. I've had some gnarly experiences with pallies. They just make your hands go numb sometimes. So, I've had cuts on my hands and messing with pallies, and I've never gotten my eyes or gotten sick or anything, but I just feel like there's some risk there. So sometimes I'll wear gloves if I know I'm going to go cutting stuff up.
Yep.
If it's just SPS corals, a lot of times I won't. I'll use my hands because I feel like it's less damaging on the tissue. And after the dip, what I do is I look to see if anything's fallen off. If I can't see anything after swishing around, really cleaning it, and nothing comes off the coral, a lot of times I'll just cut it, glue it on a new plug, and then either stick it on the frag rack or in an isolation tank or quarantine tank.
New plug, that's a good one.
Yeah.
If there is a pest on a coral, it is usually at the base of the coral or on the frag plug.
All right. Well,
So
the eggs are definitely
yeah.
down at the base or below the tissue line, and then the pest itself could be crawling anywhere really, but it's those eggs, and those are the things you can't see, and dips won't kill them.
Yep.
And those are going to be the things that really get you in the display tank.
So do you just cut the frag off of the plug, or do you cut it up, a quarter of an inch higher and leave some of the base on?
I've done both, man. I try to cut it like if the coral is shaped to where I think it can handle the cut above the tissue line, great. If it's so small where I just got to crack the glue off, I've done that.
Yeah.
And I still think it's effective because you're getting rid of that ceramic plug, or whatever it might be, a ragacrete, whatever it is. But then there's also times where, corals, like, they won't come on a plug, or there's nothing you can do with it. And so that's when you'll get the repeated dip, especially when I see stuff come off the corals. And then I'll rinse it, take water, put it back in a dip. Sometimes 2 different dips.
Yep.
There's like iodine-based dips, for sort of like bacterial type stuff. If you got like a soft coral or something that you're worried about, or something happens to this coral in your tank and you got to pull it out to dip it.
Yep.
A lot of times that's infections.
So he'll do multiple levels of dips just to potentially different things?
Yeah, if I notice something is really nasty. But generally speaking, I just use 2 Little Fishies Revive, wash the coral off, and then I'll rinse it. Usually don't do 2 rinse baths. I'll just have the one, and it's tank water. I'll just rinse it a couple times, and I'll dunk it quite a few times, and then right into a quarantine or a frag holder.
Now, what's your go-to? So 2 Little Fishies Revive you use the most?
Yeah, that's the one that I've just used for the longest amount of time. I've never found a need to get a different one, but I have used Coral RX, worked great. I've used the Coral MD by Brightwell Aquatics. They've got I think it was late last year they might have come out with it, maybe earlier. I'm not sure when, but it seemed fairly new. But they have like an all-natural remedy, which is kind of neat.
I guess tea tree oil is one of the main ones.
Yeah, the Melaleuca or tea tree oil. I know they use it. What's that other one they use? Melafix and Pimafix. That's like a freshwater bed that you can use. You can use it. The pond formula is stronger, and I'm pretty sure it's the Pimafix one. And they have a pond version, which is like higher concentrations of the Melaleuca. You mix that with salt water, and that can be a good coral dip. One of the big frag farmers out here, Steve Garrett, that's what he uses, and it's always worked great. As soon as you stick them in there, it's just like any other dip. The stuff comes falling off.
No, exactly. Another big thing is too, when you have them in there, make sure you agitate the coral. I tend to use like a big syringe, and I'll take big things in our turkey basin and just keep shooting it every couple minutes. Just so if there is something on it, you're potentially dislodging it with the water force from the syringe.
My favorite fish tank tool is the bulb syringe, and It's a toss-up, forceps and bold syringe, but I use those things
Tough.
like pretty much every time I go look at the fish tank. I have
Mm-hmm.
something like that in my hand, you know, whether it's
Yep.
to blow the rocks off, to move a coral, to fix a snail that turned upside down, move a crab that's eating something or making me upset.
Mm-hmm.
Any of that stuff, you know. But yeah, the bulb syringe, it's magical.
Yeah, exactly. So Lynn was asking, what if you mix two dips together?
Don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it.
I mean, you know, if there's some crazy remedy out there, recipe that I'm not aware of that seems to be working for people not killing coral, great. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's just be, you know, you don't want to ever mix chemicals, especially
Yep.
when it's proprietary formulas, which has, you know, is not so uncommon in the aquarium industry because,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, yeah, I would just, you know, I definitely wouldn't recommend doing it.
I mean, if they're the same base, could be issue free, but if you don't know, something might react and maybe it will even make it less potent. Like, you never know, right? If you want to use
Yeah,
multiple dips, do one dip, rinse it off, then do the next dip, then rinse it off again.
exactly. And that's what I would do is like if you're worried about not covering all your bases or you just want to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you spent way too much on the coral, then the multiple dips is probably a good
Yep.
idea.
One slight disclaimer. I've learned my lesson about be very cautious when dipping deep water acros. They are not fond of the dip. Anytime I've ever dipped one, they've bit the dust on me.
What
So
kind of dip was it that had a problem? Just any dips, multiple dips?
basically any. Two little fishies, the Revive and Coral X are the main two that I use.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be either one of those, but they've never. So if I dip those, I'm very mild, but they're usually the smooth skins a little easier to spot stuff. But
Right.
this is a bit of a caution. Those ones have never been a fan of the dip for me. They've never worked very well.
What's your theory? What do you think it is?
I don't know. I think maybe it's
Just
just
more
this.
sensitive?
Yeah, more sensitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I really don't know either, and it's kind of the first time I guess, I mean, it kind of sounds familiar, but I mean, I've never myself. I think the one deep water app grow. I'm trying to remember it. That was Echinata, I think is what it's called, the blue, like a blue and green one.
Hawkins and Canada.
Yeah, Hawkins. There you go. That's the one. Grew into a big old colony, and I don't remember dipping it.
Yeah,
yeah, I
that's
don't
why
remember.
it's a big colony.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why it got to that point anyway.
Yeah, some of the comments. Red Dragon will go up in flames. There you go. I think it's common.
Yeah.
Is there any other corals that you don't dip for any reason, or certain ones that you think are too sensitive for dipping offhand?
I used to not really dip LPS corals all that much. I just never did. I never really had too big of a problem with them. But after this recent lesson learned of when I killed the hammer, whatever infection I had, I mean, that just happened in the tank by all means. But yeah, I think I definitely will dip every single coral, especially LPS going forward now, you know?
How about something like an enemy?
Yeah, no, they don't get it. They just get
they don't
acclimated.
get it.
They just get drip acclimated. Same with, you know, hermits and other invertebrates. No, they don't get any sort of treatment. I just slowly drip them. I guess we never talked about that with fish and inverts, you know, the drip acclimation and temperature.
Yep.
So I tend to have a pH meter and a thermometer around because what I'll do is I'll just stick the pH meter in the acclimation chamber, and when I see the pH matches, and of course the temperature, but temperature should really already be pretty close. Is then I kind of figure, okay, well, I know I've done my job here, and I'll test them prior so I know how much it's actually changing too. And sometimes also if they're real far off, I'll put a little bit rather than have to wait so long for all of that water to come out of the tank and to actually get up to the pH. I'll put like a cup of water into the acclimation one to try to get it there a little bit quicker. Because after about 30 to 45 minutes, you're going to start seeing a temp drop off. Like the water that's in that acclimation temp is going to really start dropping. So I don't really want to get past that point.
One trick, that's a good point. One trick that you can do, sometimes I'll use like a big measuring cup type of container. I can put the handle like on a sump baffle, and then you could have the dipping container in your sump, just make sure it doesn't spill. But if it's hanging off the edge, then the tank water will help warm it up and keep it warm. If it is sitting on like a cold floor, for instance, I mean, it could very well be cooling down as you're dipping into it, and it kind of messes with your temp.
Yeah, most definitely. I like to do the thing where I'll put a bucket inside of a bucket. Sometimes, you know, you don't get a lot of water with these animals, and so I'll put the little specimen cup in the middle, put the bag water in there, and then I'll just slowly drip into that center cup, and it'll sort of overflow. And once it kind of reaches the top of the specimen cup, and it's all sort of intermixed water, then It usually takes about 20 minutes.
Yep. Now, the other thing I'll do, it's really easy to make a little dripper just using some air line, a little air valve. If you don't have one of those too, I'll just take, a little measuring cup, little scoop of water out of the tank and put it in every couple minutes.
Yep.
That's the other kind of manual way I've done it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always drip acclimated, but I just tie it in a knot, man.
Mm-hmm.
You can just tie it in an overhand knot and just sort of tighten it down a little bit, and it'll start to drip out.
Yep.
I mean, it's not foolproof.
Mm-hmm.
They can loosen up on you. You really want to stick around, not overflow it. But
yep.
I've lost so many of the pinch valves and different things like that that I started tying them in knots, and now I don't worry about it anymore.
That works.
I do like the YouTube though, the little YouTube, little 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch, rigid YouTube. Mm-hmm. I always keep one of those around because
hangs on the tank. It's easy.
Yeah, it allows you to hook it on the tank.
Yep.
And if you have a cumbersome sort of bucket situation where the tube won't set in there, if you've got 2 of them, you can hook it right on the bucket.
No, exactly.
They're just nice to have.
No, I agree with you on that one. Mark C was asking, what's your opinion on coral acclimation? Some people say temp acclimation only is what you do. Other people say drip acclimation is important for the coral.
I don't drip acclimate coral all that often. Usually, I guess with mail order stuff I do because I feel like it's,
gone through more.
Yeah, it's gone through more, and temperature and pH changes could happen with all of that time it's been out of the tank it was in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess I'll do it then. But generally, if I'm just buying a frag from somebody local or a local fish store or something, generally I'll just bring it home, clean it off, dip it, and stick it right in the tank.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean it's just what I do.
I used to be more worried about, say, different parameters in the tank, but I've actually found them not to really care as much. Mm-hmm. I learned after a while when I had my doser was set too low on my nano, and it was at like alkalinity of 6 for the longest time. My big tank's always 8.5, and I move stuff back and forth all the time. And I actually tested one day and realized how low it was. I'm like, holy smokes! Yeah. And then just think how much that that's a 2.5 DKH swing, and I move stuff all the time. Nothing's ever had an issue with it.
Right.
So
right.
I mean, if your tank's constantly swinging, that's a whole nother story because it's constant stress. But just the one-time thing, I don't know. I haven't found it to be a big issue.
No, yeah, I think the other factors that come into play are just much more serious,
Mm-hmm.
and the shock it has, and plus the coral's full of the water that it was in when you stick it in your tank, so
yeah,
it's probably not much of a rapid change until that coral sort of exchanges the water that's within it,
mm-hmm.
With the water that's in your tank. So that takes time, and I think by that time the coral's plenty acclimated.
Yep, exactly. And usually, too, when they're shipping stuff, they usually have a bit of a slime coat that kind of protects them and isolates them to a certain extent.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a good point, too.
I've never done this, but I was reading stuff about people taking corals like on a plane and stuff where they had to deal with the water. They just wrapped it like an acro or something in wet paper towel and transported it that way. And it was completely fine. So just to show how much that slime coat can actually kind of protect it.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, there's plenty of corals that, they hit naturally will hit air, the low tide and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm often amazed at how little water they can get away with. But then, when you think about a coral, it's not breathing the water. It doesn't need the oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in there that's really going to foul the water unless it dies. So you really just need to keep it wet. That's really all you got to do.
Pretty much. I mean, it's not making waste like the fish do. Actually, that's another good point. Sometimes with fish, if it's been in the bag for a while, sometimes it's worth using like a prime or ammonia neutralizer, because when you start mixing the water, sometimes it could actually boost up that ammonia and spike it when it gets exposed to air. So I have seen some people, if it's been a long shipment, like they'll add a ammonia reducer or something to it right away to help neutralize any of that.
You're saying
buildup.
They'll add that to the bag
to the bag as they're acclimating it.
Right. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I've never done anything like that. Really. It's only situations where I'd have to set up a tank real quick, which try not to do at all costs, but there's certain situations where you got to do it.
Yep.
And those are the only times I'll ever use something with, like an Amquel or something. Ammonia.
Good point. Setting up a tank quick. If you get a new fish and you need to medicate it, quarantine it, something like that, it's good to have some form of cycled media to introduce to your quarantine tank to make sure there's a bacteria population.
Right.
So there is bottle bacteria, but usually I'll have something like marine pure balls or something in my sump where I can throw a couple of those in the tank with it to introduce that bacteria source, or have it in a little filter, a hang-on filter or something along those lines.
I made it a pretty common practice to always have multiple bags of media. So not just one, but I'll have a few. Not only to share with friends, because I'm always talking to people with new tanks and things like that, and I've helped out a lot of people with that. Just like, hey, just bring it back when you're done.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, the instant tank. I mean, if as long as you've got that cycled media and it's healthy, and you've got some salt water, you have everything you need for a quarantine tank, and it can be instantaneous. As soon as the water's heated and you've got the water in there and that biomedia and it's moving, you can put a fish in it. And the same goes with the coral.
And another super easy one too is sponge filters, where you just run an air bubble through. It's a sponge. Like just throw a couple of sponges in your sump somewhere. Once they're in there for a few weeks, a month or two, they're going to be full of good bacteria. Super easy to pop in a tank with an air thing. You got instant little kind of quarantine or little filter for corals, fish, whatever it needs to be.
Well, the nice thing with that is it's providing a little bit of movement, the filtration, and also the bacteria, sort of all in one. Well, you're getting mechanical and biological filtration in one. So it's going to be, I guess, a little easier to set that kind of tank up.
They're only a couple bucks too. So, I mean, never hurts to have one of those on hand.
There you go. That was the word I was looking for. Economical.
Economical. Exactly. Bank account friendly.
Yeah.
So talked about that. Acclimating corals. What else did we miss? Did we miss anything?
I don't know. We did. We talked about cutting off the plugs.
Yep. So that's a big
huge.
one.
Yeah, it's huge because they're. I guess let's talk about a coral quarantine tank. I mean, it's kind of one of those weird things. It's super beneficial because it allows you to observe the coral. If there is any pests, it gives you time to get rid of them. A lot of times, these eggs and things like that, you need to let them run their course, but you also have to be able to identify them and physically remove them from the coral. And the only way you're going to do that is to let it hatch and grow. If you can't scrub it off. But if I see stuff, there's probably likely eggs somewhere in on that coral or in a similar coral. So I'll just go scrubbing at it, cutting it off regardless. If you've got the quarantine tank, you can see that sort of come to fruition, and it's not going to happen in your display tank where you're putting everything else at risk.
Exactly.
And at least you can, in this situation, you're really limited with medications and dips, but at least you're able to see it and not put everything else at risk.
Yeah. No, very true. Now, you can do, you don't even need a full tank. I have had, when I was doing my upgrades in the past, I had a bunch of acros living in a 5-gallon bucket with a heater and a power head for a month. So, I mean, cheapest quarantine tank known to man. Here's a spare heater, here's a tiny power head. That's it. I just did a water change on it every 5 days, 7 days, just to replenish those elements, because obviously I wasn't dosing it. I had some massive frags in there.
Yeah.
So super budget way to do it. And I mean, it would be a good idea to do with every corals, but generally this would be something, that one was due to lack of space. But usually if I know there's a potential of something from the tank it came from, or if you're dipping and you see some little critters fall off of it, then that would be a little red flag that maybe it's worth taking this extra step.
Sure. And you obviously know when you're getting fish and coral ahead of time, so being prepared is big. But when I'm getting a big shipment of coral or something, I'll just make sure that I've got it ready and on hand that way. But if it's just one coral from I just happen to trade with somebody or find it at a local store or something like that, okay, we dip it, we clean it, we put it in the tank. But if I'm getting a shipment online, a lot of times I find myself doing the drip acclimate and doing an isolation on them because it just seems more worthwhile, I suppose.
Yep.
And you can put fish and coral together. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have two. The thing with coral is you just got to keep that chemistry on point.
Yeah.
You don't want to be, you're trying to, if you're over here struggling to maintain your display, and then you've got these corals in ISO and they're going through even more drastic changes, you're not doing yourself any favors. So just, to watch that. You really don't have to split them up in quarantine until you medicate the fish. And then at that point, you don't only have to worry about copper treatments and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's possible, as long as you don't have to run into any sort of fish medications combined with, any sort of coral dip or something like that.
Now, you mentioned copper and fish medication. So certain medications do have copper in it. And that is, make sure you never do that one with coral, because a lot of corals, copper will kill them. So you definitely don't use coral with copper, or inverts for that matter. So
yeah, it's inverts, and then it can leach too. I think it can soak into your rocks and then slowly leach out thereafter. So even if you were to take it out with carbon and whatnot, I think you can sort of have trace amounts, and then the smallest even amount of copper can be toxic. So
yeah,
just something you want to stay away from.
Yeah, exactly. Never in a reef tank. I think that one's fairly common knowledge by now, but just in case, copper reef tank, bad.
Yeah, don't build a reef tank with pennies on the bottom.
Wishing well, bad things happen.
exactly.
What other ones you got? Any other good tips you got offhand?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, man. I'm trying to think.
I know we
This
covered a
this
pretty good
topic,
spread.
yeah, and the topic's sort of pretty well documented. There's so many people out there doing this now. Oh, I mean, we can talk about finding reputable dealers. We talked
Yep.
about Photoshop, but there's some big ones out there. There's some small ones, and there's more and more popping up all the time. It's very easy for a guy to grow a coral in his garage and ship it to you.
Yeah.
The problem that you're going to run into with these people that aren't, some of the majors like Worldwide Corals, Unique Corals, Battle Corals, Cherry Corals, all of these places have been around for a minute and they've got big facilities. They have the tools to do it. They're just much more prepared to grow these corals and send you a pest-free, safe, healthy coral.
Yeah.
You guys that are shipping them out of their garage, they just aren't set up to ship things, let's just say efficiently. You're much more likely to get pests, and then you're also much more likely to sort of be let down when you get your coral. A lot of times they're chopping stuff up, gluing it on a plug, listing it online, and selling it within 5 days, 7 days. You know what I mean? Maybe 2 weeks, but still not long enough for this frag that you've cut to attach, to grow onto the encrust the plug, and then sort of be established and healthy. Personally, I don't think you should be shipping clippings. You should be shipping. It should always be a coral that's established and healthy and happy, because you just far better chances of survival through the shipment.
Yeah.
And when you get a coral that's been freshly glued onto a plug in the mail, you probably want to think twice about that, unless it was obviously you bought it knowing that that's what it was.
It's fresh cut.
Yeah, fresh cut. Because I've seen that too. Guys will advertise, fresh cuts. But if you're paying a premium for designer coral or just anything online, I would expect to see a grown flag or an encrusted frag.
100% agree. And actually, someone recently that I got some frags from, actually, I don't even have him yet because he's been waiting for him to heal up. So same thing, just letting it sit for those few weeks, make sure it starts to encrust. It's not a fresh snip, and make sure the frag's nice and happy before you put it through the stress of travel and introduce it to a new system.
Sure. And yeah, that brings up a good point. If like you're doing stuff with your friends, you want to practice the same thing, because you want to ensure that you're doing everything to increase the survivability of that coral wherever you send it, and you're not doing yourself any justice by just cutting a coral and sticking it in a box. You just give it the time, the couple weeks to heal up. You and your friend will be a lot happier when it's all said and done.
Exactly. Now, completely different kind of side topic, but it's always good to share corals with your friend. If you have a nice new colony, give your buddy a branch. He gets new ones, gives you a branch. If you ever happen to lose one, you kind of got your backup source. So.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's so many benefits to that, and I talked about it a lot. But yeah, just involving yourself in the community, making friends that keep fish tanks. There's just so many benefits. Not selfishly. Okay, you have access to more coral, and that's cool. You're not going to pay as much for coral, that's for sure. And then, like you said, you always got a backup brood stock or stock.
Exactly. That's huge.
Things are going to happen. You're going to kill coral. It's going to happen. It's just obviously minimizing that, and then learning from your mistakes is huge. So by having that backup, and then you meet new people, it's just an excuse to get out there and send somebody a message. Some guys, I got a bunch of these frags, okay, well, I can trade you this, and now you've got a new buddy.
Exactly, right? And I've made really good friends just through the hobby. So
totally
way to do it.
Right. I think we made friends through the hobby.
Yeah, sure did. Aw. Another big thing is too, it's a lot cheaper to trade someone a coral than it's to go buy them. So.
Oh yeah, that's what I was getting at. I mean, you're to spend far less on the coral, if anything at all. And a trade's a trade. So there's none of this designer markup because of where it came from, or
Exactly. Right when you give a coral name, the price is like.
So. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's cool, and there are definitely some truth to like, corals that are fully colored, been in captivity for a while, and have this sort of popular genetic, or let's just say documented genetic, of being very successful in aquariums. There's truth to that. I think that there's definitely, some sort of genetics that are much better suited for captivity than others. And so, I'm willing to pay more for that. But just because of a name or, very, very slight color variance, that's hard for me to come around to. So, yeah, that's just the way I feel about it.
No, I agree. I like bright colors, but I also don't want to go bankrupt over a coral.
Yeah, exactly. That I mean, could potentially not maintain those colors, or it's just a lighting thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes, I don't like to run super blue lights. I like a 14 to 10K look in a
Yep.
tank because I like it natural.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always blown away, and still to this day, like I'll turn my lights all the way up, or well, up, but all the way blue,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just blown away at the colors that I see. It's like completely different colors.
Black light party in the tank.
Yeah, I mean it's just insane, and like it almost looks like a different tank. It's pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate both. I'm always torn, so mine's really whitish in the afternoon. As the day goes on, it gets bluer and bluer till later in the night. So
Yeah, I'll do the ramp up, ramp down, but
yep.
generally speaking, when I'm staring at it, a lot of this has to do with filming in front of the fish tanks because you can't have tons of blue light.
Yeah.
But it's grown on me, and I also like brown corals. I mean, I like algae and brown corals and things like that. So the white daylight sort of renders that environment, I guess, a little bit better.
Nice. Lynn's asking the most expensive coral you have in your tank right now. You go first. What's your fancy coral?
Oh, they're all priceless.
All priceless. Love it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I've got so many old corals that they're hard to put prices on, honestly. I've got corals that are, I'm trying to think of the oldest one. So 2009 is probably the oldest coral.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what is that, 9 years?
That's pretty good.
10 years. Yeah, so I mean, those, I've got a big Acanthostria colony. I've got a big Fabia colony, big Poslepora, big Ceratopa, like a bird's nest. Yeah, those are probably the biggest ones. Is the Acanthostria and the Fabia are probably going to be the most priceless. I mean, we're talking 100 heads or more.
Nice. What do I got? I recently just traded a buddy for a nice big chunky frag, pink Cadillac, which I know is overly priced coral.
There you go. I'm trying to think. I've got this thing called a Jolene acro, which is pretty. I like that one. I've got a real cool cobalt blue millipora that I like a lot.
Is it like my favorite one? It's Palmer's blue millipora. Out of the same one. It's like baby blue man. With like teal frags.
We talked about this at one point, but mine came from Steve Garrett, who has the outdoor coral farm.
Oh, nice.
So it's I mean, his corals are super healthy and fat and just awesome. But sometimes the color's a little different, because he's got the lights outside. So I couldn't exactly tell you what the genetic is, but it's a blue millie and it's just beautiful.
Nice. I'll send you a photo later. I'm curious to the same one.
Yeah. I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago because we were talking about favorite corals and we started talking about milliporas. Because they classically are one of my favorites.
Mine too.
Yeah,
special place in my heart.
The fuzzy sticks, man. They get you.
They do. You remind me though. Acans, like 4 years ago, probably I bought like the single head of like a rainbow acan for like $80. Like super expensive. And now there's like a ton of heads in my tank, so that's probably the most expensive one now, given what I paid to how many heads I have now.
Yeah, exactly. And when you think about it, gosh,
I love it.
How many times? Yeah, well, I paid for corals and I saved for coral. Saved for coral, like all week long or 2 weeks, whatever. Go down and buy this, I buy a frog spawn.
Yeah.
And then fast forward 5 years, and there's tanks that have frog spawn growing out the top.
Yeah.
And so, it's just funny how you kind of learn those things in time, I suppose.
Well, there's another thing for designer coral, maybe it's some brand new fancy one. It's $300. Give it 2 years and everyone has it. Now it's $30.
Yep.
Because
it happened with the storm clownfish.
Yeah.
What was funny about that is it just seemed to happen so quick. And I mean, I would say 12 months. It only took a year and a half, if I'm not mistaken, right? And they dropped significantly in price because they're, a couple hundred when they came out. I think they were 300 a pop when they came out, and then now they're down to I think 100, 150, something like that.
Yeah, more reasonable.
Much more reasonable, yeah. But yeah, that's something we got to talk about next time is captive bred fish, man. It's just some cool stuff happening all over the place. It's really cool.
We'll do it in a few weeks.
Sure, I love it.
Awesome. I think we got most of the basis. That's all I can think of, at least for the quick overview of it all. I'm going to be bringing a bunch of frags and different things home from the coral show, which I'm going to this weekend. But it's going to have to have them for a couple days, so hopefully those extra few days they'll make it.
But, where you have to stick them in a hotel room or something?
Yeah, I'm going to the Niagara Coral Show. I'm flying on Friday, but then I'm coming back Tuesday, so the show is Saturday, Sunday. I'm not flying back till Tuesday, so.
And you're speaking, right, at the Niagara Coral Show?
I am.
Ooh, what's the topic?
I got to give it a title.
Okay.
different kind of ways of preventing disasters and stuff you can do with controllers and different forms of automation. So
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
yes, that's a good
There's your
side
title.
topic for it. Yeah, but a bunch of different kind of, fancier and more budget approaches to prevent some of the more common disasters and stuff that could happen.
It's funny, we have like a preset clip for that quote in our video assets here. Like,
yeah, you just drag and drop it
so many times in videos because it just fits in so many places in this hobby. Well, with reef tanks specifically, reef tanks are just so different.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just I laugh about it every time I see it. It's this little like, it's got Ben Franklin on it. It's a little bottle in the sand, and I just giggle because I'm like, it's funny that we have a quote like that preloaded to use into our videos, and it comes up, man. I probably used it in at least 10.
It's true. It goes a long way. Yep. How about a rainbow torch? Oh yeah, I got a rainbow torch. That's really inexpensive, Coral.
Those are pretty.
It is. 420 Reefer. Super chat for Super Guy. Thanks so much, buddy. Much appreciated. Aww. Thank you for the Coral Fund donation for the frag swap.
Any other questions? We got time here. People have questions, man. Bring them in.
Can't make the show. Thank you so much, 420 Reefer. Much appreciated. Quick question about how much of a salinity swing is acceptable on a day.
None. Yeah, I say that just because an ATO should really keep it within, like really
enough that it won't swing.
Yeah, very very minimal swing, like immeasurable almost, because by the time you get back to the tank, it should already be topped off.
Yeah. Although I got a really interesting thing.
Sure.
I was talking to a lady from Toronto that has like a gorgeous saltwater reef tanks, like tons of acros. She does not have an ATO. She does it all manually. And it's like a 20 gallon tank. I know.
I mean, that's awesome. That's admirable.
It is.
She's probably very diligent and patient.
She's extremely. Anyway, so I'm gonna hopefully go shoot a video of her tank and do a little interview with her, which I think is gonna be really cool.
That would be awesome.
Her tank, just the photos I've seen, her tank looks gorgeous, and it completely amazed me. I'm like, what? How do you not have that?
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that'll be cool.
What I'm gonna get at with salinity here is, so what hurts animals in a fish tank is drastic changes. So, going, let's say, 0.024 to 0.0245.
Yeah.
That small little change isn't too much, but you go 0.02, or 0.024, 0.026 right away, two different bodies of water. That's the stress factor.
Yeah.
Now, in a tank in a single day with, let's just say you have some crazy evaporation rate, it's still going to be a gradual drop because it's based off evaporation. So I think, generally speaking, from my experience and what I'm just thinking about, like, within a 24-hour, 48-hour period, if your ATO's off or something like that, you're probably not going to run into too much of an issue. Now, when you start having things go back and forth, where you have an overfill, and then you have an underfill, and you have an overfill or an underfill, that can, I think, cause a lot more stress and problems in your tank than if it was just like, well, ATO's broke for 2 days and I didn't notice it. Because it's going to be that gradual, increase, I guess, as the water evaporates.
Yep. Now, with fish, there's one way that's harder on them than the other. Is it increasing or decreasing the salinity?
They can't.
I can't remember which one it is, but I know one of them's a lot more.
Osmoregulation. I'm trying to think of the salt, how it goes. I have no idea, man. But I knew what you're talking about. Let's see. We got Google. We got Google right in front of us. Let's see what Google says.
Yep. McCullum's Reef at ReefDudes, best fish for pest control. Big fan of yellow chorus wrasse. They're awesome for pest control. They'll eat basically any pests. So they're probably a good go-to. There's like Melanaris wrasse, which are good when they're small. When they get big, they're not quite as good of a worker. But wrasses are usually, especially small ones, are good because they'll constantly go and pick off any little creatures that might be in there.
I'm reading Google, Devin, so
perfect.
Stand by.
All right, I'm just skimming the chat for whatever questions I missed. There's been a lot scrolling by.
Go for it, buddy.
Yeah. Anyone see a torch-dominated reef? I have seen a few kind of like nano reefs where it's just like a big tree of torches and looks amazing, just all the different colors together. I think that'd be cool to do. When am I going to be at the show? I am flying to Friday morning. I'm flying out to Toronto, and I'm promptly going to the show. So I will be in Niagara Friday to Sunday night. Monday and Tuesday, I'm hopefully going to hit a bunch of the stores. Probably going to do Ripley's aquarium. Hopefully getting a behind the scenes thing. I was talking about that, so that'll be a cool video. And if I can, go check out, like Frag Garage or Frag Box, Candy Corals, a bunch of those type of places. So we'll see what happens, but hopefully do that and then flying back on Tuesday. I was doing practice for your speech today. Excellent. I'm recording all the speeches, so it'll be good. I was working on mine last night too. Any tips on how to remove algae from the skeleton of a hammer coral that is near the tissue? If it's like a hair algae, a lot of those ones like that, if you take a soft brush toothbrush and take the coral out and put it in just a different container of tank water and you can lightly scrub it, you can get a lot of stuff off that way. And also if you have something like a tang, they usually pick at it. Certain hermit crabs and snails, they'll still eat it. Get a shout out to K-Town, who is stepping to get a nice month-long vacation with family. Month-long vacation? Oh, that sounds amazing.
That sounds like fun. I am ready for it.
I'm very jealous, K-Town. How's the calcium reactors doing? Well? I know you're thinking about getting a calcium reactor. So on mine, I have my Alcatronic testing the tank every 12 hours, and it's always within 0.1. It will go up or down 0.1. So if it's 8.2, then the next test will be 8.3, and it goes back to 8.2. Like super duper stable. That's like the tiny little swings I get over a 12-hour period.
Well, I can't find the answer.
No worries. I'll find out later. I'll find out for the next stream because I'm curious now.
All right. Yeah, no, me too. I'm going to probably sit here all afternoon.
Wondering.
Yeah.
Richard knows the answer. I've had this deep conversation with him, so I'll bug him later.
There you go.
Yep. He's a wise one. Well, I think we basically covered everything that was on my mental to-do list for today. Any other questions in the chat? Let us know before we call it a day. Would you recommend no sand in a quarantine tank? Yes. I would always do bare bottom, because if you medicate or use something like a copper-based medication, it's potentially going to be, within that sand later. So you're not going to want to reuse that. So most people, if there's stuff in there, they'll use like some PVC pipe or something that's really easy to sterilize afterwards.
Yep. Highly agreed. Yep. I never put substrate in.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Neptune will ever release their elk mag tester? It's coming eventually. That's the theory. Terrence is in the chat. I'm sure he'll pipe up if he's still paying attention. Okay, so fish breather, easier with lower salinity. Therefore, rising the salinity is a lot harder for fish than lowering it. So it's the rise back up that's more of an issue? I don't know. I'll check with them later. I'll find out for you guys.
Yeah, that's what I got with this article. I got really confused because it kept saying up or down, but I didn't know if it was referring to like a higher concentration of ions or like an increased salinity. I didn't quite follow it there. So
yeah. G-Day reefing, should you test every 11 hours so it's not always testing the exact same time? So 2 different ways. So mine tests every 12 hours, so it's exact same times every day. That's how I do it. When I first got my elk tester, I had it testing, let it test every 2 hours for a day just because I want to see how it changed throughout the day. Now that I know it's pretty darn stable, it just seemed like a waste of reagent to me. So now I test every 12 hours. My buddy Brad's tank, who I featured in my Monday video, he tests his every 11 hours, so it's constantly shifting a little bit throughout the day. That's how he likes to do his, just so the auto top off or stuff doesn't necessarily affect it. But my tester basically rock solid within a 0.1 swing. So 8.2 to 8.3 is the most I ever have. And then the next test back to 8.2. So personally, I don't really worry about it because it's such a minimal swing that it's all good. Cycling my display tank, ammonia nitrate 0, but nitrate has remained at 5 ppm. Nope, that sounds like you're providing you actually saw ammonia and you actually saw nitrate and now it's at 0, then it sounds like your tank's probably cycled. Now, if you've never saw those values at all, then your tank may have never really fully started cycling in the first place, which generally I would personally add bottle bacteria or something to kind of kickstart it, but you also need to feed that bacteria. So you have to provide an ammonia source, whether it's like a fish food or if you just buy pure ammonia and you can dose it, make sure it's not like a chemical cleaner for the house that has additives, it has to be pure, but you could use that to feed the bacteria. But if you're not feeding it, it could have, dwindled down or not actually been there. So you have to make sure you see ammonia, goes away. You see nitrate, it goes away. Then you'll just be left with nitrate. That's how you know your cycle's completed. And all is good to add fish and stuff to your tank. Kevin, Coral Fund, $10 super chat. Thanks, Kevin. Much appreciated. Actually, Kevin was showing me his dipping system the other day, and he has
Okay.
one of the most hardcore dipping systems I've ever seen. It's very admirable. Like, he makes me feel guilty for not doing well enough. But Kevin's,
Okay.
he'll have a big tub of water with a heater in it, so it's all temperature already.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Okay.
he'll have his container for his coral with his dip, and then he'll have 3 different rinsing containers. So he'll get one, he'll rinse it multiple times to make sure none of that coral dip ever makes it back into the tank. It's the most like admirable hardcore dipping system I've ever seen. Kevin, it's amazing, and thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. So
Yeah, with the multiple dips or rinses, I just do it once. But it's certainly point. The point here is don't get the dip in your display tank.
Yep.
I mean that's just terrible.
Exactly. Whatever's in there is probably not good for it.
No.
So, but yeah, three rinses. I was like, that is extreme. I've never done more than one. So, but yeah, Kevin, thank you, and you are an amazing dipper. Hats off to you. Recently added peppermint shrimp to kill a couple baby Attasia. He cleaned it up the first night. Now it seems he's attacking my acan. Should I remove him immediately? If you're not feeding him anything else, I generally feed my shrimp mysis or whatever else I'm feeding the tank. For instance, like my fire shrimp are little punks. Like they'll try and go steal food from the corals or little buggers. So I usually try and feed the fish and the shrimp first and then kind of feed corals afterwards because they're punks. But if any of these creatures are underfed and they're hungry, they're going to become more opportunistic, and there's potential that they could, pick at coral or something else. So,
I've had it both, where they steal food and
Yep.
they eat an LPS polyp. I've watched it both happen in front of my eyes. Like Devin said, I mean, sometimes it's hit or miss, whether they have a taste for it or not. Just like the Aptasia thing, I've had peppermints eat them and peppermints that won't go near them. But I think the general accepted method is just try to feed them, keep them full.
Yep, exactly. Ironwork Aquatics. Can I get a shout out? What's going on, Ironwork Aquatics? So yeah, one of the big things, make sure your fish are well fed, make sure they're not going hungry, and if they are, they're more likely to be more opportunistic. So I think that goes a long way for a lot of things. So keep that one in mind. Big Dipper is right. All right, any other good tips for you?
From me? No, I think we're good. Yeah, not in terms of quarantine. I'm trying to think of going through racing through everything, but I think we covered everything.
Perfect. Acan, Skywalker, the Bayer Advanced Method dip for corals. I have Bayer. I've never used it though. Like if I run out of all my other dips, I might try it. But yeah, I got some, but I've just never ever tried it. So
yeah, that's they'll use it for red bugs, right? Red bugs or nudibranchs, one or the other.
Yep.
Monty nudibranchs.
Ben Ross is the lemon tree still alive?
It is indeed. It is indeed. They're actually well, it's still kind of cold, but they produced fruit. All of them did. Yeah, I've got 3 citrus trees, and they produce right about this time. So,
nice.
Yeah, all of them produce, and they're happy and healthy. He's getting a lemon tree when I move out of state. So.
Oh, nice, perfect. Yeah. Just waiting for that lemon supply,
eh? Yeah.
Yep. Any tips how to eradicate vermetid snails from your tank?
Oh my gosh! Please tell me. I don't have any, but I've got a ton of vermetid snails, and I cannot stand them.
You have to basically. Some people break out their little tubes, but they'll come back. You basically take super glue or something and seal off their little tunnels. Yeah, I've
tried, and I mean it works. It works, but
it's worked though.
You've got thousands and thousands of them. There's not amount of glue on this planet that will be enough to do it. I've been plagued with them for like 3 or 4 years now, and they just keep showing up in the next tank, man, and really is frustrating me. But I think this next time around, I'm gonna really do a good job of killing them off.
Yep. No, that'll be good. Get there eventually.
It's just because I transfer the corals. The corals just go from tank to tank, or have been. I think they've been in three tanks now, and so it's just they get stuck on there, and I'll clean them, but they come back, man. Yep. I hate those things right now.
It's true. Okay, Xeon Zoop did a 95% water change. Oh, 2 change salt. Oh, from Aquaforce to Fritz. Is that a risky move? Yes. Okay. If you are doing a massive water change, you want your salt to match what your tank is. If you do a massive water change and your elk, your pH, everything's pretty close. Elk, pH, and temp are the main 3, right? But mainly pH I'd never really pay attention to, but elk and temperature, as long as those match, it's less of a risk. But if you're changing from a salt that has, like an 11 DKH salt and you do a massive water change with like an 8.5 DKH salt, that could be a big swing impact on your tank. So if I'm ever changing salt, or I've never paid attention to like change salt, I would just start using a new one because I only ever do small water changes. But just do it slowly. Do a 5-gallon bucket a week or something and just slowly ease your tank into it rather than trying to change everything all at once, because there's no big advantage to that unless you're trying to deal with like a big nutrient issue or something else. And if you're doing a big massive water change, pick a salt that matches whatever you keep your tank's parameters at. At the end of the day, that's the main thing. At ReefDudes, I use a bumblebee snail. Ever since I added one, the Vermetid snails disappeared.
I will try.
I have a bumblebee snail, and I do not have Vermetid snails, so maybe there is a good correlation there.
I've had a few, but I don't know if I had them before these things showed up or not. I'll give it a try, man. I'll report back.
Yeah, let me know. I do have one in there. I know I have one bumblebee snail, so maybe that's why. I don't have an issue.
I'm going to go buy them like right after this phone call, and I will let you know.
Perfect. Excellent. That could be like a little golden tip right there.
Yeah, no, that'd be cool. I've actually been trying to find and research things that would possibly, like eat similar things, because they're actually a snail. And so it's just the way that they're shaped, it's just you got to be a specialized eater to get in there and really get it,
Nope, exactly.
We'll find a solution.
Yep, well, try it out. That may just be your golden solution right there from McCullum's Reef. All right, guys, I think we pretty much covered everything for today. Next week, sadly, I will not be here because I'll be in Toronto or potentially on an airplane or something close to that point. So no stream next week, but next week after that, we'll be back at her and we'll get back on it. So thank you, everybody who joined today. Robert, as always, thank you for jumping on the stream. Always love having you.
Very welcome, buddy. Thanks for inviting me back, and hopefully we'll be back on here a couple weeks soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
All right,
have a good night.
Yep, bye.